What's up? What's up? What's up, everyone? This is your boy Dapper Data, the show that makes data your passion. Okay, this is the Data is My Science podcast. As you already know, all the old listeners know, and new listeners are about to find out. So, as you know, I've talked about artificial intelligence over the years. I've talked about machine learning as well, and I really have delved deep into both. Right, supervised learning. We talked about robots a little bit, but I've also kept it at a high level as well. So I actually have a special guest on the podcast today, Dr. Joshua Smith, and you'll get a chance to know him very well. But first, I kind of want to tell a story, right? I want to tell a story to get into some of the topics that we're going to talk about today. And I already talked to Dr. Smith about this, but I think about my past, right? And I think about and throughout my life, I've actually gone through church, right? You know, my mother, my father, they've gone through church for many years, and they actually introduced me to the church, and I was all about the church life, right? I was really involved. I actually became the IT ministry lead of my church at one point, and but it was just basic stuff, right? Your servers, your routers, your switches, all the network ports, all that good stuff, right? But nobody ever talked about data science related stuff, right? I mean, I don't know if I'm just getting older. I'm only 35, but but at the time, throughout my time as the IT ministry lead, we didn't talk about any of that stuff, right? We just talked about your basic things with technology. And so now you go into technology and you start to hear more about artificial intelligence. You start to hear more about robotics. You start to hear about data science, right? Which is what I'm really involved in now. And if I go back through my journey in life and I go through the educational system, I actually it was always this tear, right? It was always this tear between you're learning about artificial intelligence, you're learning about data science, right? But you have faith, right? You have religion, you have faith, right, involved as well. And so they always say, man, you can only have one or the other. You have to choose, right? You cannot educate yourself on both. And so I brought a special guest here that actually says, look, let's talk about both, right? Let's talk about the bridging the gap, right? Because you can't fight the way the world is going right now when it comes down to artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all that good stuff, right? I mean, you think about it, the kid, right? I have a 10-year-old son. He's always talking about when he first gets up in the morning, right? He's like, let me get my phone. It's spring break time. He's like, let me get my phone. I'm on TikTok. I'm on social media, right? And I'm trying to get him off of it, but that's a whole other story. And so when he goes to sleep, he's like, oh, let me get into social media again, right? Let me get into whatever it is. But he's not even thinking, okay, this is artificial intelligence, right? Hey, he goes to church, he's still involved in church and things like that, but he's never trying to compare the two. But when he gets older, right, it's going to be something where I just want him to be educated on both. So I actually have an expert here, right, Dr. Joshua Smith, and he's going to talk about many things, right? He's going to talk about AI driven robots. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the ideology of artificial intelligence, and another topic that nobody talks about, right? And we were talking about this earlier, is the oppression of artificial intelligence, right? It is very important. This is a conversation that can get serious, right? But it's something that a lot of people, especially the younger generation, need to understand as they grow into this AI world, right? That's coming. And so we're just going to have a great conversation around artificial intelligence, around how automated warfare could impact us in the future, and just a lot of good conversation right here. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about Dr. Joshua Smith and what he does. And right now he serves as a pastor and independent researcher. He focuses in on the intersection, right, bridging that gap between faith and technology, which a lot of people are kind of they're choosing one side or the other, right? But we're going to talk a lot about the differences, the intersection between the two, and especially AI driven robots. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you all to Dr. Joshua Smith. Say hello, Dr.
Hey,
Joshua.
hey, you can just Josh is fine, man.
Oh,
Just
Josh is fine. Okay,
Josh
man.
is fine.
Yeah, I don't know when I get my doctorate. I don't know if I'm going to. I stress so much, right? At one point, I
Hmm.
said, "Look, I'm not going to tell anybody to call me doctor, right?" But then
Yeah.
it was a stage in my life where I said, "Hey, somebody's going to call me doctor because I put it." I
No, it does feel
don't
good. I
know.
appreciate it. I
No,
appreciate it.
but
No,
yeah,
man. Yeah, I'm a pastor, and that's my full-time job. That's my vocation. And I kind of see it like pastor by day, researcher by night type thing. So if you like Batman, um, yeah, that's kind of how I view it. And so I really kind of coming out of the PhD, which I just graduated last year, so newly minted and everything. But I didn't see a lot of research on this area, as you know, and there's not a lot of. There's either we're not going to talk about religion, right? That's one of the taboo things you don't talk about, religion and politics. And so I'm kind of like bringing them all together and trying to be civil and say, hey, we want to work together for human flourishing, for the good of society. But there's all these problems ahead of us if we just kind of segregate everything. And as we've seen already, that it's something as a society we must acknowledge there's problems, and we just from history we learn, man. If the public doesn't say anything, if we're quiet, unspoken about things, then change doesn't happen. So I'm glad you brought me on. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about this stuff. And so that's pretty much me. Been married 11 years.
oh,
Got two
great.
kids. Yep, and my wife has put up with a lot of weird stuff. I was in the military for a while, so deployed, and then she put up with me going through a PhD program, and I was in school for like I think pretty much all of our marriage. The first 12 years just school, and before that, I was in and out of um, different things. Different jobs, and don't come from an educated family.
Mhm.
I'm the only one to go to college.
Man, breaking that
Uh,
generational curse, right?
I did, man. I just like, where do you go? I just kind of went to the ceiling. So,
I
um,
know your
yeah.
kids, man. They're going to say, they're gonna say, "Man, I got to do this now," because
No, man, they don't. If they, I told them, I tell them all the time, man, it doesn't matter what you do. I
right.
love you, and if you want to be a mechanic or a plumber or whatever, you don't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't wish this on anybody,
Mhm.
and so yeah, I didn't really want to research this topic, just to be honest, because of all
Oh,
the issues that we talk about.
yeah.
And but it was introduced to me,
Mhm.
and or offered to me, and I did an independent study on AI and theology, and I just always been curious. I programmed robots when I was in high school for
Mhm.
for the Nissan factory. I did that
Oh,
for a summer. So I've always been fascinated by robots. I worked with a few in the military. System called the Phalanx system. It looks like a big R2D2 with a 20 millimeter gun on the bottom of it. So it's really wicked looking.
mhm.
Um, but yeah, I did that, and then so it all kind of intersected when I watched the HBO series Westworld. I don't know if you've seen
Oh,
it,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but that really got me thinking about, if we could create an AI driven robot, what would we do with it?
Mhm.
And I think they get a lot of the neuroscience wrong and the cognitive science, but I do think they get right like how we would use it, and
Mhm.
especially with data and stuff. I don't know if you've seen the current season, the last season,
No.
but there's a really interesting thought behind what they would do with all this collected data
Mhm.
and how they would use that to control the world, to control the outcome of people's lives, to set certain caps on people's lives. And I really think that's where we're headed in a lot of ways. And so this book that I've written, Robotic Persons, it's a Christian perspective on all these issues that we're going to face with AI and with future robots.
Mhm.
And it's not so much like I care about robots and just concerned about how they're treated. It's more so that I'm really concerned about how we will be affected by um, mistreating uh, a, a a person or mistreating an object, and kind of what that does to us, right? And I think a lot of people have very strong opinions about this. And so just right out of the gate,
Yeah.
if I ask somebody, can a robot be a human? It just invokes a strong response, and they can't tell you why. They may not even can tell you what a human is,
Right.
uh,
Right.
but they're like, no, it cannot be human. And I would agree with that, right? But
Yeah.
then you break it down even more and say, okay, can a robot be a person? And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times we think, well, a person is a human, but I don't think that, even in what I do in the book is look kind of biblically, can we define what a person is, what a human is?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a person is a character in a story. So, there's all kinds of characters in the story of God's word, right? There's all kind of characters in our life. That doesn't mean that they're human. It doesn't mean that we give them human rights. Doesn't mean that we give them human responsibilities and all that stuff, but that we can treat them in certain ways and give them certain levels of responsibility. And I think that's for us the most responsible approach to this. And so that's what I argue for in the book. And it's called the argument for legal personhood. So there's
Mm-hmm.
different types of personhood. There's moral personhood, which we have as humans, and then there's legal personhood, which a bridge can be a legal person. A
Mm-hmm.
corporation is a legal person, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so anything that can enter into a contract, be an object of lawsuit, those type of things. And so that's really what I'm arguing for in this book. I'm not arguing that we grant robots, um, you know, moral person. Yeah, right. And I'm not saying we won't ever get there. I don't know, but we kind of see from the animal rights movement, and even from the women's suffrage movement, like people are like, and even African Americans,
Mm-hmm.
well, they're not really, they can't have property. They can't do these things, and
Right.
at one point, that was legit how people believed, right? And that's not something we just made up. People really thought that if you were an African American, you were less than human, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And people really thought that women had, a lower IQ or whatever. And so all this stuff has kind of unfolded over the last couple hundred years. And so those of us in our little community of robot rights, we're saying, well, maybe robots start to fit into these categories as well. Not that they're human, and not that we equate that to all those movements and rights and civic rights and stuff, but that there might be something there for us to rethink regulation and writing some of these policies so that
Right.
we can protect people from further oppression and hurt, because we haven't always got it right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great point, and I think and I'm pretty sure we'll end up talking about this a little bit more, but the it's about so you have the robot, right? But there's somebody behind the robot,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so you have that way of thinking that people may say it could be biased, right?
Yeah.
It's fed into the robot or the machine, and it could be biased. So I know when we talk about like what our beliefs are on the future of robots and how similar they are to humans. Well, I mean, the way I look at it is, this robot that's being created, right? There's somebody behind it programming it, right? That's where
Mm-hmm.
the jobs are going to sort of go or shift to, right? You may actually have a robot that can replace some position that you're
Mm-hmm.
in. But now, as the new generation is growing up, right, it's not, hey, let me be this maybe worker, be the person that the robot may take over. It's I have to learn coding maybe or something that's behind the scenes to actually control the robot. So I still am teaching them to think like this,
Yeah.
and so that's just my thought on it. And so my opinion is that that we are still decades away from maybe the future where robots just carry out more difficult and meaningful tasks,
Mm-hmm.
than humans. But um, I mean, we're far away from what you would look at like on TV, right? On TV, on television, on the television, they actually talk about humans being portrayed through like science fiction and all that stuff like that. The robots, back then.
Yeah.
We're not there yet, or not. We're close, I think, but I still think we got a little ways to go. Do you think that at one point, um, the future of robots would be very similar to the human?
Okay, so there's like different depictions of
Mhm.
robots in film, and they're not usually great. We
Right,
think
right.
about Blade Runner and Terminator, all those, and which I love those films. iRobot, and robots are totally different entities, right? But like you said, AI, all an AI is an artificial entity that can um, make a decision based on a process of evaluation.
Hmm.
Okay, so that's AI. What is a robot? A robot is just the robots I talk about anyway. They're just the embodiment of that. And so we, and the way that it works sometimes is we know what the robot's doing, and then
Hmm.
sometimes we don't, right? And so there's inputs and outputs, and there's in between those are these little things called nodes. And in certain systems, right? So we need to be careful. In certain systems, yeah, you can say, okay, I gave it this input, it traced this pattern and get this output. Now, some of them it can't. So that's the difference between supervised and unsupervised learning, right? And so when you get into more unsupervised stuff, and we don't really know why it made that decision, and so
Right.
that's what's troubling to a lot of people is, okay, why did it make that decision? And that's what people fear, and we have a right to. But
Hmm.
there's something else. There's something else that we need to fear, and that's our trust of the machine over the human,
Hmm.
right? So like um, most of plane crashes are related to human error
Hmm.
most of the time. And so if the pilot trusts the navigation system more than he trusts, you know, his ability to read the instruments or whatever, or if you're going down the road and you're in a new city, right? Do you trust the GPS?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Do you trust autocorrect on your
Yeah. Oh,
keyboard? Yeah, like no. What if it was spelling things wrong on purpose? We trust it, and I think
yeah.
that's a bigger issue for me to think
Or
about. Is
even
that
automated cars, right? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, we do.
trust
We
them
just
to make
we
that right
tend to
decision.
trust that it's unbiased, it's smarter than us, and that I think that's just not true. As far as like computation, yeah, it can compute things differently and faster than we can because we have a different neural network,
Hmm.
right? And that's just we have a wet neural network. It's slow.
Hmm.
It's old. It's MS DOS, or
Yeah.
slower. And the older you get, the slower it gets. But it's more reliable, believe it or not. And there's something to that. But
Probably because it's actually experience stuff, right?
yeah, your experience, you're embodied, and so a lot of times what we do, and you see this throughout, and I'll trace this in chapter 2 of my book, is that through this development of robotic futurism is what it's called. We start to like project onto these machines, oh, they're like children, or they think like this, and they develop like human. And then I just don't think that's true. And I think a lot of people are starting to kind of point that out. Like, machine is not going to desire the things that we want. If it was fully autonomous, why do we think that it wants to take over the world? Why do
Hmm.
we think Terminator and Skynet is where it's like it may want something totally different.
Right.
It may want to live underground and never deal with humans at all.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of scary too, though, is just we project all these things upon it,
All
and
negative feelings, right?
all
We project
negative, lots of fear.
Yeah, I've
And
never heard of anybody say, I I believe that artificial intelligence may make a robot one day change the world to where we all can get $1 million or something like
yeah,
that. I don't know,
well,
Some
it's there, like, but it tends to be one demographic, if you know what I'm saying. Like, it tends to be more privileged, upper class people who, and I do talk about that too. Is
Mhm.
it tends to be white males who come from a certain family
Mhm.
who like this technology is just going to it's going to make everything better. It's going to prevent poverty. It's going to, and it may, but common sense, I think, would tell us otherwise, that that's typically not how technology ends. It usually hurts people. And even stuff like the chocolate industry, right? All
Mhm.
that stuff coming from the Ivory Coast.
Mhm.
Um, uh, there's so much stuff in the food industry that's unethical.
Yeah.
And why do we think something so complex like technology is going to make us more ethical?
Yeah.
And I don't get it. But that's why I'm here, and that's why other people like me are trying to write and educate people. Like we need to be concerned because, like you said earlier in our conversation, AI, it has somebody behind it, right?
Mhm.
There's somebody who wrote the code. It's an imperfect human who
Yeah.
has biases, who has prejudices, and you don't come to it as a blank slate. And I think that's what scares people is we're projecting our fallenness and our brokenness upon the machine. And I think there's some reasons for that. And we're starting to see that it's very dangerous. And I think, too, there's a great book, Artificial Whiteness,
Mhm.
if you're interested, by a scholar. I think it's pronounced Yarden Katz. I think that's his name, Katz.
Mhm.
And he wrote a book about the imperialism and capitalism behind AI,
Mhm.
and how the things that we think about AI now is right. Oh, it's just a bunch of algorithms and all this stuff coming together to process this stuff. It doesn't have bias, and we know that's not true. Um, because if you go to Google, type in black hair,
Mhm.
the results that you're going to get are pretty disturbing, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
yeah, and there's all kinds of stuff that
It
you
is
just.
right. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I mean that definitely goes in when we talk about the impression of algorithms, right? You
Mhm.
know, and you look at how just a simple like Google search of something, you know, it has to be some type of biased results, you know, in the algorithm that does not that actually could offend a lot of people, right?
Mhm.
When you do the search, right? You
Yeah.
know, so I mean, you bring up an amazing point from that aspect, you know. Um, so I think you mentioned something about rights
Mhm.
related to AI, right? And it was
Yes.
interesting because I actually saw this. I'm sure people who follow artificial intelligence, they've seen Sophia,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
and so I said, man, I got to talk about Sophia if we talk about this topic because you know Sophia was granted citizenship, right, in
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia. So the first robot to be granted that, right? And so you know, and when we think about citizenship, right, when you think about as a citizen of a country, you know, you have the right to own property sometimes, right? You know, you may be able to vote in certain elections and things like that, and even run for office, right, and elect
Yeah.
the office, right? And so those are the things that I first thought about when they said that Sophia now
Yeah.
has citizenship. Oh my goodness, can a robot? Are they going to have rights? Could our
Um,
president be robotic one day? You know,
I
what
mean,
your thoughts,
so
man?
Sophia is interesting, and she also has a lot of really uh, strong advocates and strong, uh, opposition. And
Mhm,
a lot of people say that Hanson is the company that made her. That it's just a stunt, and
mhm,
she can't like vote in Saudi Arabia, and most
mhm.
women can't, which is kind of why that's offensive.
Yeah,
She has more rights than actual women in that country. But yeah, I think that's the question that I'm interested in.
yeah.
And I think when you talk about rights, I think it's very important that we talk about nobody is making an argument in this community for human rights for
Mhm,
robots, right? I don't think that they'll be equal to humans at any point. Now, I think a lot of times we like to push, right? So we challenge and say, "Oh, people, it's not a human. It can't, well, what is human? What does it
mhm,
mean to be human? Is it, cognitive ability, the ability to reason? Is it some property that we hold inside of us?" And you see throughout the history of philosophy, right? People try to solve that problem and they
mhm,
fail because
mhm.
there's nothing we can observe other than I know I'm a real person, right?
Right.
But
Right.
then this could all be a simulation. I can't prove to you that I'm not in a simulation right now, or that
Hmm.
you're not a simulation of my own mind and I'm in the matrix somewhere,
Right.
right?
Right.
I can't prove that, but I believe that it's this real, and that this is real, and there's real consequences. Um, and so the rights for robots people, we're not saying human rights, we're saying legal rights. And so what legal rights means is that there's this gap, right, in responsibility. So how do we hold the robot responsible for damage that it causes without the company saying, "Oh, well, it's just a piece of property.
Yeah.
It's just an algorithm that ran. Sorry."
Yeah.
Well, you know, if that's the case, nobody wants to buy that product. And just like you said with the self-driving cars, is the car going to um, protect the driver or the pedestrian? Well, who's going to
Mhm.
buy who's going to buy the car that protects the pedestrian over the driver?
Right. You're right.
So I'm
Right.
not I'm not getting in that
Protect
car.
myself, right, and my
Right.
family.
So, likewise for corporations stuff, what companies are gonna buy these products that could be really great, that could be really useful and helpful and provide a lot of good if they're gonna get stuck with the lawsuit. And or if you can't go back and say what company's gonna make those robots or whatever it is, if they're only going to get sued, if the programmer's going to get sued. And so there's these responsibility gaps that we have to account for. And so this is a way it doesn't solve all the issues for sure, but it kind of minimizes the gap a little bit so that we can say, okay, look, we don't know why the robot did this. We don't know. The answer is not blaming the corporation, but the answer is not also just giving them a scapegoat either. There has to be some middle ground here if we're going to protect humans and protect human coders and
Mhm.
manufacturers. So there's
Yeah.
all these dynamics playing and swirling around, and we don't have all the answers because guess what? There hasn't been any hard case studies yet. But there was one, and I mentioned in the book, where this programmer gave an AI,
Mhm.
it gave it some Bitcoin, and every day it had a certain allowance,
Mhm.
and it went on the black market,
Mhm.
you know, totally on its own. It went on the black market and it bought like cigarettes, a spy camera, a couple other things, and then some ecstasy.
Mhm.
And they put it in an art exhibit. Okay. And then the government officials came in and said, you can't have that in here, right? They were showing all the things that the AI built,
Mhm.
and so they arrested him. Okay,
Mhm.
well, they didn't technically buy it off the black market.
Right. Right.
The AI did.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
who is responsible here?
Who's at fault? I don't
And
know.
so a lot of people say, well, the programmer is, but he technically didn't buy it. And I think too, you'll get into that as corporations now. There's one in China who has an AI entity on its board.
Mhm.
So now we're getting into real
Decision making.
practical. Yeah,
Serious decision
right.
making.
And so it can sign a contract, it can do all those things, and what if it sells all its shares one night, or
Mhm.
what if it
Oh my
whatever.
goodness.
Yeah, and so this is not just something that a bunch of weird guys thought up in a room somewhere just because we wanted to sell books, but this stuff's going to have practical implications in our lives, and it already has.
Right.
We're just now starting to kind of trace the threads.
No, this is so interesting because when I started getting into data science, one of the first things I thought about was like insurance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think about okay, you get into an accident and you have an automated a automated vehicle, right? And like who's at fault, right? I don't know who's at fault, right? Could the driver have stopped them? Maybe they were sleeping. They just believed so much in the vehicle, they just let it go do its thing. And then, but I think the real question will be, can you protect the coders, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
that the people behind them, if they did not account for making a right versus a left, or this specific person, right? We talk about oppression of algorithms,
Yeah.
maybe an individual that was African American, right? And they say, oh man, I just, for some reason, I wasn't able to detect that, right?
Yep.
Or something in there where they just missed a step, right? It's so much dependency on that coder to be right, right,
Yep.
in every aspect of it. And so that puts a lot of pressure on that person, the
Mm-hmm.
more I think about it. And at the end of the day, I think that's the only person that you can kind of trace back to say, try to put some blame on, even though I still think that you should not,
Yeah.
but they're the person who developed it, right? They're the person who's making the decisions to say, if you do this, then you do that, if
Yeah.
else, and, some basic statements like that, right? And so, oh my goodness. You have me thinking
Yeah.
about all kinds of
Yeah.
things.
It's complex, and I think too. And talking about go back to the oppression part of algorithms and stuff and facial recognition and all
Mhm.
that stuff. There's a great kind of exposure in that because a lot of these robots and a lot of this facial recognition stuff was not doesn't have access to a lot of black skin,
Mhm.
and so the rate of failure for like identifying. But this is where we're headed, right? And China's already they got more cameras than they got people,
Right, right.
and so but theirs is really precise, and so I don't know what they're doing right and we're doing wrong, but and we have a high rate of failure, so that scares me for people of color, because if you have a 70% 80% failure rate, you identify the wrong guy, you punish him or take him to jail or whatever it is, I mean, that's an issue. And
Yeah.
I think some of the problem is we want to innovate so fast, and the rate of innovation is so fast, and we don't stop and think, oh, okay, should I do this? I know we probably can, right? We can, but should we do it? And I
Mhm.
think that's where people like me come in and aggravate people and annoy them and say, yeah, that's great, and you present this narrative like AI, robotics, it's everything that's in the future. We need to do it, but I'm like, I don't know if we should. I don't know.
You're right.
I don't know. We've messed up so much stuff in the past. We've hurt so many people. Like I don't know that we've really figured out. It's like we don't know what a human is. Let's make a robot that looks like a human.
Yeah. Maybe
Okay.
they're doing
Yeah.
steps, right? Maybe they need to. I always believe it's always about, when I say about the data, it means like the more historical data you collect, the better decisions you can make,
Hmm.
and maybe they haven't collected enough, from the right resources. And, of course, you want to make sure it's clean, because dirty data gives dirty decisions, or bad data gives bad decisions.
Yeah.
But, the more you collect, the bigger the data set,
Hmm.
maybe the better the chances of efficiency, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Or it could be that the bigger the data set that you get, the more likely you could reinforce what you want to see happen. And I think
ah,
that's what you see a lot in the military. And so, just a little background on AI. A lot of it has been propped up by the military industrial complex,
mhm,
right? That is what drives research and stuff in our country, right? The military is one of the biggest employers in the U.S., right? And so, I mean, on the civilian side,
yeah.
now, this is something we don't often think about. Is if you take away a lot of that research, you take away a lot of jobs, you take away a
Mhm,
lot of food. And I'm not for or against military right now. I just don't know where I stand. Um, uh, but you can't deny that AI is built on the back of the military,
mhm,
and it's being used in a lot of strange ways because it's being used to say, okay, in 2010 it was rebranded. It was
mhm,
rebranded to say, and that's where we start to get all these narratives about AI is unbiased. AI is, our objective, scientific, empirical way to make decisions.
mhm,
But it's not. It's not. And in fact, it's a way for us to say, okay, let's take like drone strikes, for example. We can guarantee, based on this algorithm, a certain percentage of collateral damage.
mhm.
Okay, well, we have a certain amount that's acceptable, right?
All
It's like,
right.
okay, well, but that's so cold and calculated, right? That's still a possible child and
Yeah.
still, an innocent person,
Mhm.
um, based upon an algorithm.
Yep.
That's crazy. It's crazy to think about. And there's all types of other stuff that the public really doesn't see. All we hear is, oh, well, it's, the computer ran this program or it did this. And so I think the same thing is going to happen with robots. They're just, now
Mhm.
it's just AI with arms and legs, you know?
Right.
And now when it makes a mistake, you die or, you're maimed or something like that. And so I think the risks are much higher. Um, and we don't have a lot of room for error.
How far do you think we are from? I mean, you brought up a great topic because we talked about your background, military, and then
Mm-hmm.
automated warfare, right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's something that I think scares a lot of people, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think about that every once in a while. I'm like, oh my goodness, because you have the strengths of artificial intelligence that I see, right? I see a lot of strengths there, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
they're effective at a lot of tasks, at certain tasks. They're effective at maybe imagery, right?
Mm-hmm.
Image recognition, things like that, or recommending something, right?
Yeah.
For right? Or even language translation, right? We're talking about being able to speak multiple languages,
Mm-hmm.
those type of cool things, right? But then I do look at some weaknesses, right? I see like multitasking sometimes, as being a weakness, like the human is capable of being able to identify like a enemy, right, vehicle, being
Yep.
able to decide a weapon system to
Mm-hmm.
employ against it, predicting his path, and then being able to engage on a target, right? All at one time,
Yeah.
and they're able to do that because they've been training, and they have those resources in their head, because they've been training. They have the experiences, right? But then the weakness sometimes I see in the human aspect. Sometimes it could be a weakness, depending on what it is. Empathy,
Mm.
right? You think about the emotional side of things. Do
Yeah.
I embark on this because I have these feelings from this experience that I had years ago, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I get all twisted in the mind when I think about warfare, right?
Mm-hmm.
Warfare and automated warfare and AI and stuff. What's your thoughts on that?
I'm strongly against it. Um, uh, surprise, surprise. I'm against it for a couple of reasons. The first one is the major argument for automated warfare is that it's going to prevent collateral damage, is going to prevent further conflicts and all that stuff. Like it's very much a utopian vision of like, we're just going to have a bunch of robots on a battlefield. We're going to
Right.
duke it out. But like you said, um, that's not how war works. And I don't think like if we went to war with a certain nation, they're just gonna be like, all right, our robots lost. That's
Yeah.
it. No, that's
Right.
that's not how humans work, man. Like somebody punches you in the face. No,
Yeah.
you remember that stuff, right? You
Yeah.
think about that in the bed, and
Hmm.
no, the war is much more complicated than that. And so I think some of these people who they're on these research um, funding payrolls in a lot of ways. They work with these um, corporations or whatever. They're a part of it. Okay, and so I think some of it is it just pays to say, yeah, it's going to benefit us, and it could. I'm not saying that they're absolutely wrong. They could be right. It could end all conflict. But I don't see that happening. But I could be wrong.
Hmm.
But they present this one narrative that it's clean warfare. It's the the robot's going to be able to identify and select the right munition. There's
Right.
going to be less collateral damage. There's going to be humanitarian aid. I'm like, well, you could
That's what
just
we want.
yeah,
You
you could just make a robot for humanitarian aid if
know.
that's really what you want. I mean, you could do that. You don't have to strap on a 50 cal or a saw. It doesn't have to have a saw on it. I mean, come on. But that's kind of how you advance that funding and advance that research is you say it's going to give us all these things that we want, and most people don't want war. They don't want all the negative stuff we've seen, and our country's been at war for a long time
Yeah.
and multiple conflicts, but I don't think that's the reality of it. And then another issue I have with it is especially with drones. So if there's an operator behind it, which will most likely be the reality, there's
Mhm.
going to be up close death. And
Mhm.
so David Grossman talks about the aversion we have to killing. It's just a natural aversion, unless you're a sociopath,
Mhm.
which a robot is
Mhm.
in its being, right? It
I didn't
doesn't
think
have
about that.
empathy,
You're
right?
right.
So it kills. It doesn't feel. Um, well, some do. Social robots are meant to be emotional and feel, but these are a little bit different. Um, so you have this up close killing, and one drone operator who had, I think, the most to date when I looked at it, it was like 1,600 kills, confirmed kills. That's a lot of kills, and
Yeah.
not just kills like, there's certain distances. You have like a hand to hand combat, close quarter combat, and then you have snipers and all that stuff.
Mhm.
I mean, a drone strike. It's like you can see a license plate up to 2 miles away. So you can see impeccable detail of your encounter, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
killing that target. And a lot of these Air Force psychologists were saying, there's a lot of moral injury to our drone operators. There's a lot of
Yeah.
burnout. And so you may from 9 to 5 be flying in Afghanistan or Iraq or Pakistan or wherever we're not supposed to be. And
Mhm.
then you go home.
Yeah.
You're supposed to hug your wife and kids and whatever. And so that's just not there has to be something wrong with you, right? If
Right.
you
Right.
that doesn't affect you emotionally. I just killed somebody up close and I saw, their family running to them and I'm gonna go home now.
Yeah.
That's
Think about the. Oh my goodness, this is such a great topic because if you think about the impact that it has before drones existed, right? On somebody that went in and said, "Hey, I'm going to kill this person. I have
mm-hmm,
to, right? Because it's either them or me, right? And I have to have this. I have this, and I come back home, family, and things like that, PTSD, all that stuff that happens, right, to an individual. Now, when you're talking about, I'm expanding the amount of kills that I'm probably having, right?
mm-hmm,
Because now I'm going through a technology that I know I can knock this person over here, I can go over here, I can do this and stuff. So now I turn my 800 into 1600,
mm-hmm,
right? Now I just double, triple, my kills in the span of days, hours, weeks, whatever it is. And so I'm still seeing it because I'm operating it, and we don't think that impacts, right, the human the human who is operating, and they have to go
yeah,
back home to their families, is still impactful.
yeah. I think the way that we're designed by God is killing something is supposed to be hard.
Hmm.
You're supposed to have an aversion to it,
Hmm.
right? You don't like to kill even our pets. We have a strong emotional reaction to that. And then taking a life, which we see very early on in the Bible, right? It's like one of the first major events after the garden that happens is Cain and Abel.
Hmm.
What happens? I'm killing you, man.
Yeah,
This is,
yeah, yeah.
don't even know why. I'm just upset. And there's so many layers to it. And I think another one that is unethical too is we don't talk about how addictive that thrill is. And
Hmm.
I mean, it's a very small percentage of. I was in the army side, but there's this very small percentage of people who've been in actual legit gunfights and stuff like that. I'm not one of them. I think it's like 10% or something. And so you have like 10% of 10% of the population who've been in these real harsh gunfights. And when they talk about it, it's either they are extremely addicted to it. Like there can be no rush like that, right?
Right,
You think about these redneck deer hunters and stuff.
right.
There's a reason why they get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, go sit in a cold deer stand and wait and watch is because it's addictive. It's that
Yeah,
thrill, and I don't share that, by the way. I'd rather sleep late, but
right.
some people, man, that's their life. They live around that, and then you put that to a different category when you talk about hunting a human,
Mhm.
and violence is fun. It
Yeah.
is, and it can be addictive. And so there's another level of moral injury that I'm worried about. Not just in our society is so just engulfed in it. We think about Yeah, my favorite movie is, crime thrillers.
Mm-hmm.
I love them.
Mm-hmm.
But not. We just got to be careful because when I got in to the military, I wanted to be, a ranger. I wanted to jump out of airplanes and do all
Oh,
that.
me too, man. I didn't do
Yeah,
military, but I read
yeah,
a couple of books where I said, "Oh, I'm going to be a Navy SEAL or a Ranger. That's it. I'm jumping right into the mix." And I said, "Hold up. I, I think there's an age limit. So I think it was
yeah,
around my 30 years old. I was too late for Navy SEAL. So
yeah,
I think I hit the cusp of Ranger. I said, you know what? Let me rethink everything."
yeah. But it's a big price to pay, man. It's a
Yeah.
big price, and those guys do some great stuff.
Mhm.
Especially the SEALs. They're great guys, and I support them, and I support my fellow veterans and members. But I think the machine is the problem in how we approach conflict, and I think AI and especially robotics now are becoming a part of that because they're propping up the machine even more. And it's like, oh well, when's it going to be like, well, we have this algorithm that says if we don't go into conflict with this country, then we're going to have this many people killed, and we're going to have, this much collateral damage here. That's going to be the logic before long,
Mhm.
and our kids are going to see the impact of that. Our grandkids, it's coming, and it's already here in a lot of ways. And so I want to push back on that narrative. Um, and who do they take advantage of? You know, the poor kids. They,
Yeah.
they find, and like me, I wanted to go to college.
Yeah.
Mom and dad wasn't going to pay for it. I didn't have the grades, and so
Mhm.
they got me, man. They came and they're
Yeah.
like, "Hey, here's some money. Here's school. All
Mhm.
you gotta do is sign up 6 years."
Yeah.
And I did.
Oh man, no, no, this is a great topic. I really appreciate you being on to be able to shed some light from your experience. And this is good because you've actually experienced things, right? You're talking
Hmm.
about military, right? You've been there, right? So you're shedding light from that aspect and being able to talk about how you've gone through the process of being able to study artificial intelligence, being able to study the gap between that and religion. You're a
Mm.
pastor, so everything is not coming from uh, just talk, right? Just theory,
Hmm.
right? You
Yeah.
actually are talking from experience and exposure. And I always say that's the best way to learn things,
Mm.
to jump right in and experience and these things. So I really appreciate you doing that. I wanted to talk a little bit more at the end of this about the oppression of
Mm.
algorithms, right?
Yeah.
And looking at some stuff that I did some research on when we talked about, hey, this is a hot topic that we want to introduce to people. Um, like studies show that search engines like Google or smaller search engines, right?
Hmm.
They supposedly offer equal playing field, right? For all forms of ideas, identities, you name it, activities, but
Hmm.
data discrimination is a real that's a real social problem,
Yeah.
right? That I'm seeing in the world, and it's crazy because it's something that should be highlighted more, right? So we can make an actual change. But I don't know if it's the fact that technology is moving so fast that you can't handle some of the problems that need to be handled,
Hmm.
right? They
Yeah.
want an autonomous vehicle, but let's get past some of these problems before you throw out there this
Yeah.
vehicle that may hit somebody of color, maybe, or something, right?
Yeah.
Or it's just so many different aspects, right? You look at when you do a search, right, on something, right? Say black women, you may get something out there that's crazy, like pornography, right, or something like that, right?
Most likely
First
that's what
thing,
you're gonna get.
right?
Yeah.
And so that is something that should be talked about because we have to solve those problems before we can keep moving forward. But for some reason, we're moving forward. We just keep trying to move forward, and we're bypassing some of those things, right?
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on maybe how we can even change that, or is there a
Yeah.
way to change it, or
Yeah, I would believe that there is, or I would just give up. But
yeah.
and I think too, we've seen recently the lady that was fired from Google, who was brought on to do ethical stuff. Right? She wrote a
Mhm.
paper about some of the things that she found. I can't remember her name, so I apologize to her. But yeah, she was fired.
Mhm.
She That's crazy to me.
Mhm.
You have a person of color, you have a minority working for you. that can help you kind of see and kind of drop the scales, right?
Mhm.
And so I think the first thing we need to do, especially everybody, we need to talk about this as open as we can. And so people are so uncomfortable, especially white people are very
Mhm.
uncomfortable about talking about race. And I don't know if that's just the cultural climate that we're in,
Yeah.
or people either get really sanctimonious about it. But I think coming from the South, it's just more a part of life, you know.
Mhm.
And there's black people, there's Hispanic people, and we're just all intertwined. Now
Mhm.
we're still segregated in a lot of ways. I don't
Yeah.
like it. We
Mhm.
are, and we have different cultural spaces. And so one of my friends told me, I asked him that very question, like, how do we kind of start talking about this without, and he said, just share the same space.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I do, and I'm not saying that I'm a perfect example, but I go to a black barbershop.
Mhm.
So it's very uncomfortable sometimes for me. I don't
Right.
understand all the culture. I don't. I'm very
Mhm.
white. So, um,
But you
but
intentionally do that,
yes,
so that you can. Yeah. I mean, no, that's a great point right there.
but I love it. I love it. And, it's fun. And it's like, we have church in there. We do.
Mhm.
We talk about their family, we talk about life, and that is a cultural center. And I share that space with them. And
Mhm.
I just listen.
Yeah.
And I've learned all kinds of stories about how they're treated in shops,
Mhm.
and how like customers will come in and say, just the most racist things. Like,
Mhm.
what makes you think you can say that to another
Mhm.
person?
Right.
And I don't get that. I don't get that. And so, people don't come to me and talk about this crazy stuff. And so, one, we just need to acknowledge we're in different spaces. We are. And for better or for worse, that's just, we're different. We identify with people who look like us, who think like us. And that's just, why do we think that's going to be separate from the technology that we make? And so I don't have all the solutions, but one of the things I think has got to happen is the public has got to hold these companies accountable. And a lot of them are trying to hold themselves accountable. It just it doesn't work, right? And you say,
Yeah.
I'm gonna make sure that I keep myself accountable, and I'm gonna but you can't look behind the curtain ever. You can't ever ask me questions about it, or you get fired. That's not the answer. And so I think we're on the right trajectory. I do. We are talking about race more. We're having conversations like this, and um, we're trying. I don't know,
Yeah. I
but
mean,
I
it
think,
may, it
yeah,
may not happen right while we're here,
right,
but you got to start the conversation, right? And you have to keep introducing it, and the more, I always talk about how it's sometimes it's hard to change the minds of the people that have been here on Earth for
hmm
many years, right? The older folks, right? Even the people around our age, right? The 30-year-olds, things like that. It's a certain
yeah,
point when you kind of get stuck in your ways, you're stubborn, and I get it, right? You don't want to change, but the most impactful people for the future are going to be the babes, right?
hmm
The younger generation, right?
yeah,
And so our kids, we're educating them on these things that are going on, not necessarily saying, hey, you should be against it or angry about
hmm
this and things like that, but saying, hey, look, this is what happened in the past, and so this is how we're trying to change it. And so as technology has continued to grow, as we talk about artificial intelligence, oppression of algorithms, things like that, it's great for us to have the conversation,
yeah,
but it's also great for us to have that conversation, maybe not throwing these big SAT words at the younger
hmm
generation, right? But maybe teaching them in a certain way where they'll understand when they get older. They say, hey, our parents actually, or
yeah,
teachers actually talked about this, and so this is how we can change it because they will be the ones behind creating the algorithms, right? They're going to
hmm
be the ones that are creating all these different tools, and they're going to be the developers and the programmers because the robots and machines will probably be face forward in the front of a lot of these things, right?
hmm
And so they have to maybe shift careers and maybe learn how to code more and things like that. And so they have the opportunity to make that change and difference, right?
yeah, yeah. I think that's important too. we model for our kids a lot,
Mhm.
and our interactions on social media, our interactions with people, we 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 teach them a lot in what we say and what we don't say. And I think
Mhm.
like
Great
we
point.
we we have people in our house, all color. We try to racism, I think, in a lot of ways, is something that we teach them.
Hmm.
And I mean, that was taught to me. I
Hmm.
was you don't date black girls, you don't date
Hmm.
Hispanic girls, and I tried. I got in
Hmm.
trouble, and I never understood that because they're the ones who like my blue eyes. And
Yeah, yeah.
so, but for our kids, I want to push that on them. Like, I don't want to push that, like you said, I don't want to project onto them. But we do need to, at some point, I don't know when the best age is, but I do want to, especially being from the South, they're
Right,
at some point they're going to realize that, why aren't we more involved with these communities?
right,
Or
right.
why did so and so say that about this
Mhm.
person? There's just some in our lane, and I think it is starting to change a little bit, and people are
Yeah,
starting to kind of see the madness behind all of this stuff. Like, that person is not different from me.
it's not.
They're not a different person. Their phenotype on their skin may be a little different, right? You
Mhm.
may be darker or lighter, whatever,
Right.
but we're not different.
Mhm.
And we want the same things, we value the same things, but culturally, yeah, we're different, but that's okay. That's not a bad thing. And so I think valuing culture, but also um, kind of helping our kids see that we're not afraid to kind of walk into those spaces either, and there's nothing wrong with it. Um, and we actually invite it and
Right.
cherish it. And I think too, with kind of going back to your question about tech companies, I think we have to push um, in our regulative bodies that we're trying to build. Like we have the Federal Trade Commission, we have
Mhm.
the FFA, all that stuff, um, FAA. But we,
Mhm.
we need diverse backgrounds on those bodies, right? We
Right, right.
need all demographics, people who come from different religions, people who come from different worldviews. And
Mhm.
I think really that is how we start to kind of see the gaps in our thinking.
Right.
Um, like I was raised, my grandmother, it's a very white space. So I
Mhm.
thought like that for a long time. And then when I got into the military, it was
Oh, yeah,
all
military.
all black space.
Mm-hmm.
I was the only white person there. Never felt out of place. Never felt uncomfortable. It was just welcomed into that,
Yeah,
and I saw a lot of troubling things
yeah.
um, by some very racist people. And um, so I hate that. I hate that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't change everybody's mind, but I think for me, I can choose to be different. I
Mm-hmm.
can help my kids see that this is the better choice, and I
Right.
think we can push that too as far as our government and our policies. That this is what good governance looks like, and
Yeah,
looks like
yeah.
multiple colors, multiple backgrounds,
Mhm.
and multiple degrees, whatever it is, and not just the rich white people who are in control of the technology, or the rich whatever person. It
Mhm.
needs to be regulated by the people, right?
Yep.
And we have to really push for that.
Yeah.
And so the first step really is educating people that this oppression happens,
Hmm.
and it's going to get worse if we just say, "Oh, Google will take care of that."
Right,
Facebook's
right.
they're gonna figure it out.
Yeah.
They're smart people. Okay, and you can think that if you want to, but they're not. And so I don't feel bad for these companies that have
Mhm.
profited off this oppression, who will profit off of it. I want to hold them accountable, hold them to the fire, man,
Yeah.
and teach our kids to say this. There's a right and wrong, and we need to help fight for it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Josh, man. Yeah, I think you've shared some amazing insight into things, and as usual, I mean, I don't even know if I need to share a dope data nugget at the end of the day because I think you just really ended that, you know. But I like to hear different people's opinions. I think this has honestly been one of the best podcasts that I've
Oh,
had, you know, to
thanks,
many.
man.
I appreciate you being on and sharing your insight. And, I mean, the one thing I would say, I always thought, I think I talked a lot about how um, you always thought to myself that the data doesn't lie, right?
Mm-hmm.
and the more we talk about these things, right, when you look at the results you get from some search engine, things like that, well, okay, somehow algorithm, the data lies, right, to you, but we have a way of being able to change it, is what I'm
Mm-hmm.
hearing. We have to collectively join together and start to educate each other, right? Start to educate the younger generation that's going to be very influential on the
Yes.
future, and we can one day make a difference. Maybe not when we're here, but if we continue, right, slow and
Yeah.
steady wins the race, and so we just continue to take to do things like this, right, podcasts, to do things like speaking engagements, to do things that are posts on LinkedIn, whatever it is, to continue to say, look, hey, these things need to be changed, and as we continue to grow in the masses, all groups, religions, colors, thought processes, world views, as long as we continue to grow together and we have the same mindset, we'll move mountains, right? We'll
Yeah.
make a big difference
Mm-hmm.
against the tech companies. So, I really appreciate you being on. And as I like to end now, as we talked about before, I like to get into some of the fun stuff at the end, right? We have a lot of serious conversations, and a guy named Gary Vee, I actually got this from, so I don't never try to steal his thunder, but he's a motivational speaker that I listen to all the time, and he came up with this cool thing on Instagram one time called overrated, underrated, and so
Mm.
his opinions probably mean a lot more, and they're more important than maybe mine, or anything like that, No, it's not. but I thought it was pretty cool, and so I like to throw out, right, some ideas, some person, place, or thing, whatever it is, and say, and ask the person I'm interviewing, is this overrated, underrated, or somewhere or right where it needs to be, right? And you can give your reasons why if you want to, or we can go into the next one. And so I have a list of about maybe 5 or 6
Okay.
things. And so I'm going to ask you. You ready?
Yeah. Go ahead.
All right. Coffee.
Uh, I think it's underrated. I love
Uh-huh.
coffee, man. I do, and I really preach that it's God's gift to us, and that not just coffee. So let me specify, like, good coffee.
hmm
So life is too short, and so
hmm
when I see people drinking like McDonald's, and no offense if that's you, I just think, it breaks my heart a little bit
Yeah,
because
yeah,
there's
yeah.
so much good coffee out there, especially now. And like, I get a different brand of coffee every month
Do
from
you brew your own coffee sometimes, or do you
no, I don't roast anything, but
roast it?
there's some local roasters here that I really like. Um, and then, upscale coffee. There's one called Panther I really like. There's just so much good coffee.
Huh?
So we get a subscription every month from Trade,
hmm
and they'll send you a different coffee. Like, you just tell them what you want, and
hmm
they'll hand pick it for you every month, and it's beautiful.
hmm
So
I
yeah.
would have. I have a short story about coffee. I remember one day, and this actually turned me off from coffee. I don't know. Maybe I would have been. I've never drank coffee since then, but this
Mm,
was probably when I was about 10 years old, right? And my dad, he drinks coffee, right? Even to this day, he does not. But at one point, he was drinking coffee all the time. I mean,
mm.
it was coffee every day. He was drinking coffee, and so I said, man, I got to get a taste of this coffee. I mean, this thing that he's drinking, we're going somewhere in the morning. It must be good, So he decided he left his coffee there, and he went off back into the house, right? And I said, all right, let me try this coffee, right? Without asking his permission. So I tried it, and I mean, I spit it all over the place in the car, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it must not have been the coffee that we're talking about because
Mm.
I think even my mom said that the coffee was not that good, the way that he liked drinking coffee. It was just plain and didn't have anything in it. And so I always think, man, what was the purpose of coffee? So I didn't
Yeah.
taste it since. So maybe I could revisit it. Who knows?
Just go to, like, a local coffee shop where you are, and just ask for a latte, and
Okay.
start there. Get you a latte, man.
Okay.
And it's different when it's like the heat of the milk. makes a difference. So the milk's got to be a certain heat, and then the freshness of the roast. So if you go out and drink Folgers coffee, it's pretty terrible. Pretty terrible.
Oh,
That's
the
like
one
hard
that everybody
times.
hears about on the commercials and stuff.
Yeah, it's like you're in the apocalypse. If I'm drinking Folgers, it's pretty bad. Um, so yeah, don't do that to yourself.
Okay, okay. All right, next one. So overrated, underrated sports.
For me, I would say overrated. I'm just not a
Hmm.
sports person at
Uh-huh.
all. Like I used to like hockey a lot.
Hmm.
Um,
Did you
and
play it sometimes?
I played sports growing up.
Mhm.
I played like every sport that I could play, but I think I mostly did it because that's what my friends did. And so if we
Mhm.
wanted to be together, we played football, baseball, um, basketball. I'm terrible, but I played and I enjoyed it. But you know, um, but nah, I could care less.
Yeah, yeah. I would probably say that it was a transition over years.
Mm,
When I was younger, I really loved it, played it, all the way up until I didn't play anymore after college. I played football, but then I actually, I didn't go to NFL or anything like that.
mhm.
As you can see, right? I'm doing podcasts here. It's just, but but I
Well,
didn't go
well.
to. I know, right? I never went, to anywhere after that. But
Mhm.
I started focusing on computers and data
Yeah,
and things like that, and so that became more interesting to me. And my kids, they play sports, they love it, but it just became a transition. I barely watch anything. I mean, except for
yeah,
football, I would still watch it, but
hmm
I don't even watch college football anymore. It just it's becoming overrated more than
yeah.
anything, But at one
I
point,
think
I
so.
would say, man, it's underrated, man. Sports to the day I die. I don't care what it is. Cricket. I don't care. you know. So, all right. Okay. Next one. Cartoons.
Depends what it is.
Ah.
Like, I do like anime.
Mhm.
I used to a lot more, but like more so now. Like comics, I'm a big Batman fan. Love
Oh,
it. Um, not I don't read as much as I used to, but
mhm.
just because money, it's gotten
Yeah.
really expensive. But yeah, I think underrated a little bit. I think
Hmm.
there's something to it, drawing out our imagination and the different things that you can do with storylines, and especially like what it brings out in us, right? We
Right.
um, mo-
Creativity.
yeah, yeah. So I think it's underrated.
Yeah. So would you say that so are you one of those dads, right? That says, "Hey, I can't believe you don't know about this cartoon back in the day."
Yeah, we've been guilty of saying that a few times, and we
I do
introduced them. Yeah,
too.
like Mickey Mouse and Tom and
Yeah.
Jerry and different
Yeah.
things like that. But also, it's been kind of disturbing, like going back and some of the older Disney movies. You're like, I can't believe we watched this. Like, it's
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
terrible. Like, what?
Everything from the graphics to what they were doing, I was like, man, why was I so interested in this?
Yeah,
So
like Pinocchio is terrible. It's a
yeah.
terrible story. Who? I mean, why was that a thing? Just poor Geppetto. It's like, golly. So terrible.
All right, okay, next. Hardcover books.
Oh, definitely underrated. Definitely
Okay.
underrated. I mean, I love books. I love the smell of a book. I love holding in my hand and writing in them and just like I think in a lot of ways they're like my companions. A lot of days I'll throw them in my backpack or if I go to a coffee shop, not as much nowadays, but used to back in the day. Just
Yeah.
being kind of surrounded by books. I feel like those. I'm with friends and
Hmm.
not in a weird way. Like I believe they're talking to me, but I mean, I'm dialogue with them, and I have thousands of books on my computer, but there's just something different about it.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
like it as much, and it's and more to on a practical level, just the eye strain because we
Hmm.
spend all day looking at a computer, and I don't want to look at it. Does something different to your brain,
Hmm.
and so just from a practical perspective, soft cover, hardcover books, buy it, put it in your hand, and fall asleep while you're reading or something. It's just healthier, I think.
Yeah, 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 it is a different feeling, but the new generation, I don't know if they ever get that
I
same
don't know.
feeling, right?
Well, my kids are going to inherit thousands of actual
Books.
books, so I told my wife, I was like, you cannot take these to a Goodwill. Some of these books are really expensive. Just donate them to a library. Do not throw them at a thrift store. I'll turn over in my grave.
Oh man. All right. Okay. So pets.
Hmm. We just recently got a dog last year. We took in
Mhm.
a stray. She's a miniature collie. But we've always been cat people. But now
Mhm.
I can't stand cats. Like
Oh man.
so we have a little border collie, and her name is Lady Margaret. She's
Mhm.
she's like an old person dog, and like seriously, she's just super chill, and she's a companion, man. So I think pets are underrated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love pets. I love dogs. I've always had dogs in the past. Haven't had one in a few years, and my last one was a Japanese Akita.
Hmm.
But I love them, right? I love them. If somebody else has a dog, I'm never scared. I'm always going up to them like, "Oh man,
Hmm.
let me pet you," and things like that. I would say for me, cats, man. It's something about cats that scares the crap out of me, man. No
Yeah,
offense,
they're
but
evil, man.
when I look at them, man, I'm just like, man, you could really do some damage to me. I feel like,
Hmm.
and I know a
Yeah.
dog can do damage, but for some reason they just seem so friendly. So when I look at a cat, I'm like, the way that you're just so sneaky and you can sneak up on me and just
Hmm.
scare me, man. I don't know, man.
And then their
So
eyes dilate. They look like demons. Yeah,
it's scary, man. So
I don't like it.
all right, last one, Uno.
Man, we're a big Uno family. And like,
Oh
yeah,
man,
yeah, underrated, man. I love Uno. It's
yeah, yeah.
actually been, I
It's
think it's like the 50th anniversary of Uno.
Oh really?
Uh, or it was, I don't know.
Oh man,
But
I have
yeah,
to.
it's been 50 years at least since Uno came out, and we play it with our kids, and they love it.
It's a classic. I don't think it
Yeah,
would ever die out. I mean, generation and generation will go past. They will live. They will die. And Uno, has been the classic one, right? I mean, they're coming out with all these different variants. It's like the Power Rangers or something, right? They have all these different like variants
yeah,
of Uno, but I still have to have a classic
yeah.
Uno, set
Hmm.
out of my house. So, you
Oh, for
know,
sure.
yeah, but yeah. So thank you a lot, Josh. You've been a great, great person to interview. I mean, I feel like I've known you for years.
Yeah, yeah.
So I really appreciate you being on. Again, everyone out there, this is the Data is My Science podcast, the show that makes data your passion. I'm your host, Dapper Data. Where can they reach you at, Joshua? And is there anything that you are promoting right now that you want
Yeah.
the audience to be able to check out?
Yeah, you can definitely pick up my book on Amazon. This is what it looks like,
All
Robotic
right.
Persons. And you can follow me at my website, joshuaksmith.org. And I've got all the stuff that related to my research, and all the book links are there. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you if you have any questions. My email's on there. And as you're reading, whatever, have a question, email me. I'd love to help out any way I can.
Great, great. Definitely check out the book, everybody. And as always, that you can follow me on at Mr. Dapper Data on any one of the social media platforms. The link is in my bio on my website. You can also purchase my book. It's an ebook, So sorry, Josh. I didn't do the. I plan on doing the hardcover soon. This was my first one that came out. But www.mrdapperdata.com/Dapper book. And definitely subscribe to the podcast. Thanks again, Josh, for being on here. I have had so much fun. And until next time, we got to do another one of these. Maybe
Yeah.
there's a cyber week, there's an AI week coming up
Hmm.
in May. And I've
Okay.
been thinking about doing specific segments, right? Maybe having about 15-minute snippets here and there and stuff where I talk to people that are in AI and have different perspectives on different things, different topics,
Yeah.
and just really being able to do that and promote that out, so the world can hear
That'd be
all these
awesome.
intelligent people such as yourself.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thanks,
um,
man.
yeah, definitely. So, thank you, and talk to you later.
All right, man. Take care.